Recording. Okay, so we are now recording. Welcome everyone to our weekly call. If I share my slides momentarily at least. Okay, which I think I've now done. Just let my computer catch up. Okay, so just for our weekly call this week, as you hopefully will have seen from my email, the plan had been to cover off the sort of planned DNS hackathon, but sadly Dinesh was taken ill and so isn't able to be on the call today. So if you're watching this recording, Dinesh, get well soon. And sort of literally fairly late yesterday evening, Peter kindly was able to step in. So we brought forward the topic we were planning to do later this month. So rather than DNS hackathon, we're going to be talking about advertising and tracker blocking using domains. Subtitle My Little Block List, which I think many of you may be aware Peter has been sort of operating, if that's the right word, Peter, a block list for the last 27 years, I think, for one of your posts.
Yep.
So that being the case, it felt entirely appropriate to sort of do that instead this week. So thank you for being flexible and able to join in at very short notice. That's much appreciated. I think it's going to be a really interesting presentation. So without further ado, Peter, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, my pleasure to be here. I was going to be doing this in a couple of weeks anyway, so everything was all prepared, so easy enough to step in. The title of this presentation is Ad and Tracker Blocking with Domains, but I put an asterisk next to that because I do talk about my personal project quite a bit. So subtitle might be my little block list, or lessons learned from running a block list from the last 27 years. Yeah, my name's Peter Lowe, if you don't know me. I'm the DNS Abuse Ambassador for First and the co-chair of the DNS Abuse SIG. I call myself an accidental DNS person. I've been mucking around with DNS and domains since I started this project and a little bit before. A cybersecurity enthusiast. So yeah, as a result of running this block list, I'm also a closet privacy amateur. Because a lot of it has it started off as ads and turned into trackers mostly, and I'm not working at the moment, but maybe in the future, so get in touch. Quick introduction to blocking ads and trackers with domains. The most popular or maybe most effective way to do it is essentially you control the DNS server. And when you send out DNS requests, you get a fake result back for any domains which are flagged as ad and ads servers or trackers. There is a bit more to it. There's a lot of other ways to use domains to block ads. I'll go through those in a little bit. But essentially, it's getting it's a form of DNS filtering or protective DNS, or basically stopping your machine loading ads or trackers from specific domains. So I started my list because I'd heard about this trick where you can add a domain to etc. hosts and bypass. It's basically set a domain to a fake IP address, and that would mean that your machine wouldn't be able to access anything on that domain. There were a couple of people who were publishing lists of domains that were being used to serve ads. This was back in the day when I didn't really know much about trackers. I don't think tracking was a huge thing. It's like 1997, I think, started. But it seemed to me a bit, even at that time, there were ad publishing networks. I remember Yahoo was the big one and DoubleClick. And I couldn't be bothered to maintain a list of individual host names for each one. So ad.uk.doubleclick.net, ad2.uk.doubleclick.net, etc. But I was running on my own local name server, and I realized that I could set it to be authoritative for any domain that I liked. So it could pretend to be authoritative for the whole of doubleclick.net. So what I did was I started collecting domains and adding them to my name server configuration, and getting it to just wildcard. Well, actually, you don't even need to do a wildcard with the way I was doing it, but just return a fake result or no result NX domain for the whole domain. And it was, remarkably effective. I got very excited about it. Yeah. So I thought maybe other people might find it useful. So I threw up a little text file on my website, and yeah, the rest is history, as they say. I now have a horrible pile of spaghetti code, which is pretty accurate, I think. It's a code base that I will never publish. I will never make open source ever because it's horrendous. I was a developer for quite a long time, and I know I know it's bad. So yeah. So just to talk about the blocking and how all that works. Um, yeah, there's a few different ways that you can do it via DNS, as I mentioned. You can also use a browser extension, so something like uBlock Origin or AdBlock Plus or AdGuard. You can set up a proxy pack for the browser. A proxy pack is basically just a big JavaScript function that configures the browser's proxy settings. So you can say, hey, for doubleclick.net, use this proxy, which doesn't exist, and then the request will fail to anything on doubleclick.net. You can use a host file, as I said, and there are people out there who are maintaining lists of, hundreds of thousands of individual domains, and they do an incredible job, etc. The hosts is quite an interesting way of doing it because it bypasses the standard DNS lookups entirely. Like the host file is checked before anything else on pretty much every system I've ever seen, and there's no DNS lookup done at all. So it's very quick. But if you have a massive host file, obviously you're going to have to keep that. It's going to have to be checked every time. So it's still quite fast whenever I've tested it. You can have Windows registry entries, and you can also use things like little snitch or squid or some other kind of proxy in the middle that kind of intercepts requests and blocks them based on various different rules. So those are the main ones that I'm aware of. Um, the downside with using domains for blocking is that, yeah, it's a hammer and everything is a nail. So when you're blocking a domain, you have to be very sure that that domain is just used for serving ads or trackers. This means that you usually end up with legitimate content being blocked sometimes. There's going to be occasions when that it just happens, unfortunately. And I think as a result of that, you have to be quite careful about the policy of the list that you're using. So if you're using something like Pi-hole as a local DNS server that does ad blocking, there's lots of different lists that you can enable, and they all have slightly different policies. And I think this is something my policy is published, and I think it's I think I'll go into a little bit more detail about it in a minute. It's basically any server that is primarily used to serve ads or track ads. I think another thing to be careful about if you're using domains for blocking this kind of content is you need an easy way to exclude entries. So there's going to be times when domains are blocked and you want to get to them. A lot of the time, I include in my list trackers, so that includes like email trackers. And quite often, people want to click a link in their email and get to the result link, but they get bounced through a tracker domain or tracker server, and they just want to be able to get there. So you need some easy way of configuring exclusions. And of course, it can't do URL level blocking. So any ads that are being served under another domain that's used for other stuff, or the same with trackers, then this is just not, domains are not useful for that. I mean, it depends. Everybody has different kind of thresholds on what they're willing to suffer or not. So depending on how militant you are about getting rid of this kind of stuff, you can put up with more pain than others. Upsides, though, are it can do network level blocking. So this is useful for all devices on your network. One of the really nice effects of this is that you can configure your local Wi-Fi router to use a DNS server that you're hosting locally or remotely that's doing this kind of blocking. And anything that connects to your Wi-Fi network will automatically have this level of blocking enabled, which I think is kind of one of the biggest upsides for this kind of blocking. It's really easy to configure and kind of set up, and you just need to worry about making sure that the list is refreshed, and everything's just kind of magically works. So getting uh, this kind of blocking enabled on like a mobile device or a tablet or something like that can be a lot more tricky than otherwise. You don't have to maintain a detailed list of URLs. That's mostly for me actually, because as I said, I'm kind of lazy. But if you're trying to maintain your own list of block domains, having to, I've seen the amount of work that goes into filter lists, like easy lists and AdGuard lists, and it's phenomenal. I mean, these guys are amazing, the amount of stuff they do. I don't have the energy to do that myself. So yeah, and there's companies out there who monitor the GitHub commits of uh, EasyList, for example, and you can tell that they put in workarounds. So EasyList will add a rule for a URL filter, and then it will be worked around by the company that's being blocked. Um, and then their commits stop at like 6 o'clock their local time, and you see that they start up again at 9 o'clock the next day. So yeah, there's people who are sort of monitoring these things. Another thing about DNS blocking is that you can set up different kinds of responses, and there's advantages and disadvantages to the kind of responses you get from the DNS server. It can be just like an invalid IP, so your machine just can't get to the domain it's trying to get to that has the ads or the trackers on it. But you can also have NX domain results. You can also use a local host, so you can set up something like I don't know, a little web server on your machine if you want to see very quickly like what kind of results are being sent out. Um, and that will also be relevant to all the different machines on your network. And you can have a block server, so something that actually says, "Oh, this domain has been blocked because of it's in a certain category, or it's flagged as a tracker or something like that," which can be really useful. And also, the block server logs themselves can show you give you some insight into what's happening on your network. The logging, I think, is a really interesting aspect of this. Once you set up this kind of blocking, um, you can go and have a look at the logs. And I always find it astonishing to see what are the chatty devices on the network, what kind of software is making requests to where. But yeah, another thing about tracker blocking in particular is that you really don't want to have a valid IP address returned, even though the logs can be useful sometimes. Um, if you make a full HTTP request in the background, you're going to have a lot of like traffic that you're not even seeing that's being effectively blocked. But if it's just an NX domain, then it's going to be a lot quicker and it will speed up general browsing in a browser and lots of different apps and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of ad blocking in a nutshell, or ad and tracker blocking. So I thought I'd talk about my list for a little bit. As I said, the subtitle of this presentation. I started back in 1997. As I said, my list has about 3,500 domains. I do provide the reverse lookup as an IP list, which has about 9,000 on it. And 7,000 of which are actual valid IP addresses. The problem with that list, and I don't recommend anyone use it, is that there's going to be a lot of false positives. So the only reason I have it available is because people kept asking for it. But every time someone talks about it, I just say, no, don't use it. You're going to have false positives. You're going to have to manage the exclusions yourself or the workarounds. So yeah. There's 33 different formats you can view the list in. So there's things like Netgear, an RPZ format, WebWasher, DNS mask, DNS mask. How do you pronounce that? I don't think I've ever said that out loud, apart from the other times I've done this presentation. Anyway, Squid, Unbound, and a bunch of other things. I basically, if someone sends me an example of a format that is useful in a piece of software that they're using, then I can pretty easily add it. Well, it has resulted in a very messy PHP file. There's lots of different options for the list, so you can change the IP address, which is used in some formats. You can skip host names, set the date ranges, change the MIME type, stuff like that. And I think one of the things I did early on, which has contributed to the success of my list, is a weekly script which does a check on the domain. So it goes through and checks things like NS records, MX records, CNAMEs, A, quad A, and it flags any kind of domains which fail the test as invalid. And then after I think about 6 times, if they fail, then they get deleted from the list completely. But if it works again the next time, then it gets back on the list. But it keeps the list very clean, which is nice. And you don't have any kind of cruft hanging around. Quick screenshot here. This is what the list looked like in October 2001. This is the earliest version I could get from the Wayback Machine. It, as you can see, it's kind of difficult to see the actual the text there, but basically it's me posting a few updates and then just a dump of what I had from my bind server config kind of cleaned up a little bit. There were 245 entries at the time. And then I started noticing other people doing it, and I was like, "Oh, look at this one! You know, someone else is doing it over here." And yeah, it was a bit of fun. And then that's what happens when you start a small project. Sometimes, 27 years later, you're still maintaining it. I think there's probably around 50 million users directly and indirectly. I mean, a big chunk of that is big chunk of the direct users are from uBlock Origin because it uses it as a default list. It's enabled in uBlock Origin as a default list. But there's also places like Brave and Opera and IO and AdGuard. They import it and I guess clean it up, probably put in, take out things that are going to cause issues. But I sort of tag it at like 50 million users. Random day in July, I used to have kind of good stats, but we enabled caching on the server, and I kind of lost those. I haven't bothered to go back and try and fix them up. But we did check once, and there was about 57 million downloads for one day. It's used by a whole bunch of different things, as I mentioned. Most new entries are trackers. They come largely from submissions, so people sending me emails just to say, "Hey, can you add this?" A lot of those are like regional domains, domains that I don't come across myself naturally, or ones that are from like Poland or Lithuania or wherever. So there's a few people who regularly kind of email me to get the stuff included, which I genuinely really appreciate and allows me to continue being very lazy, which as I say, I do appreciate. It started life as just a text file, and the last updated was just a stat call on the file. It's terrible. It's a really bad way of doing it, and I think it's still not a great way of doing the way I've upgraded it to. I was very excited about it at the time, and I'm still kind of excited. I still think it's a certain elegance to blocking these kind of this kind of traffic with domains because I feel like it's quite efficient, and the fact that you can have other devices automatically getting that benefit is pretty good. uBlock Origin, Raymond Hill, who's the main developer there, added it at some point and to as a default filter list that was enabled, and that kind of skyrocketed the popularity. One of the accidental benefits from it was calling it Peter Lowe's ad and tracker block list. So I got my name out there, which was only because I couldn't think of anything more clever, really. The weekly cleanup script I already mentioned, but I haven't changed the main page, the content of the page of the main page for about 15 years, literally 15 years. It's really just a kind of explanation of how the host file works. I wanted to sort of put something up that introduce people to the concept of how DNS or domains are used. I've just kind of left it there. The whole site needs an upgrade, but the data works, and that's the main thing. This is a little screenshot of the checklist, the checking script that runs every week. It gives me just the time of day. You can see the total number of domains included and the ones which are valid and invalid, anything that's been deleted, and a little bit of text that I copy and paste. I spam it onto Blue Sky and Twitter and Mastodon, just to kind of let people if they're interested, know, that it's keeping up to date. Also, I include this hashtag PGL block list report so that people can mute it easily if they want to, because I can imagine that being kind of annoying every Friday seeing that if you're not interested. So yeah, as I mentioned before, the policy I think is a really important part of any of these kind of block lists. So this is my policy. I've copied and pasted this from policy.php. I only include the highest level domains, so the highest level part of a domain. So that is relevant to specifically ads or trackers. So for doubleclick.net, I include the parent domain, but I don't include ad.doubleclick.net or any of the subdomains. This does mean that occasionally I have included parts of a domain which aren't valid domains. And I have a flag in my database which is just a forced. These are skipped from the check script. And if they ever become actually invalid, then they won't get. This is one exception to the checklist checking script that will be cruft in the end if that ever happens. But basically, um, most of them are fine. Most of them are valid subdomains. It's not only ad servers. There are a few little spyware servers, things that enable, just nasty things. That rarely happens, but occasionally there's something that I think is important enough to add. I check every entry myself personally. One of the issues I have is that I find it's difficult for me to receive submissions of bulk submissions from people. Occasionally people send me like 200 domains, which I would need to check through individually to verify that there's enough evidence that they are primarily being used for ads or trackers. And I want to be able to know that everything in there I've actually looked at personally. And it's automatically checked weekly, as I mentioned a couple of times already. Yeah, these are some of the different options that you can show. Only trackers or ad servers, different formats, changing out for my time. I think this is a kind of a duplicate of another slide. I might have to update this. Yeah, you can also add domains to the list. So you can specify some query string parameters to kind of include custom domains from your side. If you want to view the list, change the date range, you can skip entries, and for some of the formats, it's useful to have like a prepend string or appending a string, because for different bits of software, having some sort of custom path before the domain that's included in the list is useful. I don't use most of these myself. They're always, well, pretty much always been added by requests from people who wanted to play around with their software a little bit more easily. Yeah, this is the single worst code base I've ever created. It's essentially the same as when I started, which I think was actually PHP 4, not PHP 5. I will never show the code. I'm going to show one screenshot of a section in a second. But yeah, making this open source, don't stop asking me, because it's rubbish and it's not going to help anyone. It's very specific to the environment that it's running in, and it's horrible. It's just every time I made a change, I have just kind of jumped in, made the thing work, and yeah. I do have a little admin area for managing entries and news posts and things, and a very basic database for holding the domains. One of my favorite little tricks that I did for myself was adding a custom search in my browser. So I don't know if you know this, but in Chrome and Brave, etc., you can. I think in Firefox actually, you can add a custom search and assign a key to it. So you can jump into the address bar, type add space and then a couple of parameters, and then it just goes into my admin area. So that's kind of handy. Oh yeah. So here's a terrible bit of code for everyone. If anybody knows anything about PHP, you can probably tell how bad this is. There is a mix of constants in there. There's some globals. I'm using $_get directly. There's no object oriented. There's no OO. There's nothing. It's horrendous. But I am aware of this. I'm just not gonna. I'm not fixing it because it works. Yeah, this is the database. Very simple. Essentially, just the domain. I mean, again, there's a lot of legacy rubbish in there. I wouldn't do it the same way if I were to start again, but it works. I think actually the comment there's one the hidden field is not used at all. I could probably drop it, but I don't know what would break if I did, so I just left it there. But the rest of it is kind of yeah. So some issues that I've experienced with my list. If you ever start a project like this and it becomes popular, you'll experience that lovely issue of it becoming too popular. So to Matt and Neil from who are the very gracious server admins for yoyo.org, I have constantly been a pain in their ass for many years, and I've essentially forced them to enable caching on various levels. They say it keeps their life interesting, but I genuinely have to say thanks to them because they've kind of I've been hosting them with them for 27 years, and they've um, Matt's Matt's one in particular has made a lot of changes to the setup there. Um, there has been a few security issues over the years. Embarrassingly, I like to think of myself as a good, s- conscientious, secure coder doing using all the best practices, but occasionally I have been a bit amiss there. But a big shout out to I Am PyTest, who is pretty active in the ad filtering community, and he's reported a few things to me. So yeah, cheers for that. And every time there is a major upgrade of PHP, things break. There was one to PHP 8 recently, and yeah, it just broke things. So again, Matt went in there and updated my code for me, which is like kind of embarrassing, but I wasn't around at the time. So anyway, yeah. And another big issue I get is that, and if you're going to maintain a list like this of your own, people get annoyed. I later on in a few slides, I will show some of the comments or some of the emails that I've received. A big one was that I added t.co to the list because it's a tracker. There was actually some discussion on GitHub where someone said, "Oh, you've added such and such a domain, which is a bounce tracker. Why haven't you included like t.co or these other ones which are popular?" And I had a think about it, and they had a point. I include bounce trackers. T.co is essentially a bounce tracker. If you're not familiar, it's the domain that's used when you click a link on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. It bounces you through another server to record the fact that you clicked on it for their analytics, which is fine. I mean, on their own, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is tracking your click, and there's no, I mean, it could just send you straight to the target URL. And those kinds of databases can be resold. I mean, there's privacy policies in place, but you know, one of the things that I aim for with the list is to raise awareness of the fact that this kind of tracking is happening. So if you're happy with t.co tracking your click, just add it to your allow list. And that's what I do personally because I want to be able to click links on Twitter and go straight there without having a block page being shown. Go.icann.org was another one that I've added. And they were very gracious about this. I got an email from someone at ICANN saying, "Hey, this domain is on your block list. Is that correct?" And I said, "Well, it's a tracker, so yes, and my list includes trackers." So it went on there, and they just said, "Oh, okay," which was fantastic. A lot of people don't realize that I maintain the list. Um, and that's it. I don't actually provide support for the various bits of software, especially uBlock Origin. I get a lot of people emailing me. So I mentioned earlier, but one of the things that was calling my domain, my list Peter Lowe's add-on tracker server list or block list, and that does mean that people will see my name. They'll click on a link. It will say this link has been blocked because of my list, and then somehow they will get my email address. They will go to the effort of Googling my email address, and they'll send me very angry emails because they think that I get a lot of them like get this off my computer and stuff like that because they think that I'm responsible for the actual bit of software, and I'm not. But usually I try and help people out. The thing is that usually the block page that is displayed has a thing on it that says "click here to proceed" or "click here to exclude or "don't see this again for this domain" kind of thing. But uh, it's just one of the parts of it, I suppose. Occupational hazard. That's the one I was trying to remember. And there's been one time which I've been forced to remove an entry, which was I was pretty unhappy about at the time. Um, I don't want to go into details. Somebody asked me about it, but like it's I suppose there is. I've been threatened with legal action a lot of times, and usually there's nothing to back that up, so that's never actually gone to court or anything. But there was one time when I had to remove an entry against my will, and it kind of pissed me off. But then I thought, well, it's not that much in the grand scheme of things, and moved on with my life. Um, yeah, most new entries are submissions, and I get a lot of emails from people asking to be delisted, especially from companies like affiliate networks and people who think that they're doing tracking ethically, etc. Most of the time, I explain and they're okay with it. But occasionally I get into little arguments with people and, just have to kind of drop things, especially affiliates again, unfortunately, affiliate networks. I do find it hard to do bulk additions. And one day I would love to kind of come up with a better way of doing them or sort of a more easy way. Also, part of the adding process is that it does some checks and things on the domain in the background. And I just, because of the shitty code, I just don't have an easy way of doing it, is the real reason. I mean, well, apart from the fact that I want to verify each domain myself. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much it about ad blocking and tracker blocking with domains and my list. I'm gonna finish with a couple of quotes from some emails I've got. There are more angry people than happy people, I think. Well, I don't know. Maybe the happy people are less vocal, but the emails I get certainly are more angry usually. Why do I have to see your name in my computer? All I want is some sanity in my life with no bloody adverts pissing me off. My wife and I are both pensioners and all we want is to be left alone. So get yourself off my computer is a classic quote. Um, this one is, I don't understand this shit. I just know I can't go to GameStop.com unless I use a different browser. Yeah. I mean, I wish people would stop and read what's on the page. And yeah, this is a more classic one. Please get this off my computer. Like, there's no context for this email, nothing. It's just, please get this off my computer. And I'm guessing it's someone who's got like uBlock Origin installed and trying to get to something and see my name. So um, there are nice people who contact me, which is good. Um, this is someone who one of the information is lawtrack.me on the email I get from my psychic. The other ones are very confusing, but I do thank you for helping. God bless and have a terrific day. Aloha, which is it's lovely in so many ways, I think. This was I'm not going to read this all out, but this was a beautiful email I got from someone who was an old lady who was on, I think it was a knitting newsletter, and she wanted to just be able to get to the links that were being sent in the newsletter. And first of all, she completely missed. She was like sort of angry with me, and she was saying that I was preventing her and her friends getting to their links and stuff. But I explained what was going on. I think it was her son had gone and like configured uBlock Origin, and we managed to get her to um, be able to configure it to exclude the domain she was getting to, and it was all great in the end. So yeah, lovely lady. So in the future, I would like to be able to detect trackers by analyzing passive DNS data. This is a project I've wanted to do for a little while. I've been looking at Circles. I have a tab open somewhere with Circles passive DNS stuff. So yeah, I've been getting back to the swing of things lately. So maybe have a look at that. I think there's probably some ways that you could use passive DNS data to automatically pick out trackers and then manually verify them. Even just as simple as like track dot domain or tracker dot or t dot, or they're often trackers. But also like traffic patterns. If you see a particular domain being requested by multiple like geographically diverse uh, uh, IP addresses, client IPs, then that might indicate some kind of tracking going on in the background, or maybe if it comes after a request to a specific domain. I don't know. I think there's probably a way to utilize that data to get some stuff out of it. I'd also like to maybe this is a bit of a pipe dream. I think that if you trained an LLM on DNS usage to say, right, this is a normal traffic pattern for a day, I think that you could probably say, can you tell me which domains are you being used for tracking? And I think that there's potential there to get it to kind of look at the data and go, oh yeah, that looks like it's being requested. Exactly sort of what I was talking about before, but automatically with an AI essentially. I'd like an easy way to do bulk condition. And really, I should have been using Git or Git. Actually, Git didn't exist at the time, but GitHub is almost designed for a project like this. I don't have very good tracking for things like removal of domains from my list because just because of the way it works. If I remove a domain, it's deleting an entry from the database. And I don't have like a log of actions that I've been doing. I just kind of base it on the data that's there. So GitHub would be really useful for something like that, but importing it is, I don't know. It's all working as it is well enough right now, so I'm going to kind of leave it there. At least for now. Yeah, so here's some contact information if anybody wants to get in touch, and a couple of the URLs that go to the domain list, the IP list, and different formats, and a terrible homepage. So that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Peter. That was really interesting as always. And I have to say, I'm really sorry about that email. I was having a bad day at the time. So,
Very good.
Anyway, right, there's a few comments in the chat, so I'll come to those and then I'll open up, see if anyone's got anything to add. I have to say there's a fantastic comment. When it comes to clean up your code base, you'll see somewhere in the
Oh
chat.
God, there's loads of comments.
There's a suggestion from someone to throw it at an oh yeah, from Josh. Josh suggested that you should use ChatGPT to try and clean up the code.
Oh.
But he then says he's only kidding, probably make it worse. But there's a build on that, I think, from someone else. Was it Patrick saying actually you should just pretend it was written by a chatbot, and it's all the problems are down to hallucinations. So that's probably quite a creative way of using AI.
Yeah.
Blame it for everything. So right, more constructively, hopefully. I'll take these in the order that they're in. So a thought from me, I forgot what it was called. So you make use of maybe of extended error codes, sort of the structured messages proposal to give more meaningful sort of comments back to people why something's being blocked, just as a thought. Which, yeah, Patrick's got expanded on that. He's put some examples there, which is good. David, perhaps David may want to expand on this in a moment, talk about blogging on some blocking methods. So by all means, add yourself to the queue, David. We'll come back to that if you wish. Vicky has just highlighted on one of the pages you put up, there were a lot of invalid IPs on the list. And she's just curious. But you've answered that.
Just replied, it's basically because it's doing a reverse lookup on the domains. And I don't check those domains other than to exclude the ones from the list which are invalid, like 0.0.0.0 or private IPs, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's really just looking at the DNS to see what they map back to.
Kurt, suggestion, why not offer updates through an MQTT subscription to clients and interested parties?
Yeah, I could. I mean, I haven't really had any inquiries about it. A lot of the stuff that happens is due to people asking for stuff. So I haven't had anybody who's asking for like a access in that way. But why not? Yeah. Although it would be more work for the server admins, Matt and Neil again. But
you said that you're making their life interesting, so that seems fair.
No, true. Maybe they appreciate it. Who knows? I'll blame you, Kurt, if I end up doing it.
Dale put in, so Dave Lawrence, about he's been using it through uBlock Origin, and further up, I forgot, he put in the chat that through that he found that there was some tracking on, I think it was on Zoom, being used by his school. So it was helpful to know bad stuff happening, which I guess is kind of the point. And Josh then added to that, does uBlock Origin use any domain-based blocking? I don't know if you know the answer to that, because it's not your thing, but
it does. It uses my list by default, And it uses a thing called the ABP, which is Adblock Plus filter list format, and that has support. It's very actually it's almost a language on its own, but it has support for like just adding domains, and that's how my list is included. Yeah, it just ends up being converted to rules.
Fair enough. Kurt just made a positive comment about how trustworthy the list is, which is marvelous. So I think that's important to call that out. You talked about old code. I was disappointed you stuck to the same code base all the way through. I was happy to see some
Yeah.
COBOL or something a bit more interesting, but there you are. Right, perhaps more usefully, is there a reason? Is there a reason field to filter what an entry belongs to? This is a question from Kurt, and this examples like legal demanding country XYZ, malicious activity, spam, or whatever.
Sorry, I was just replying to Vicky about the number of Patreon supporters. What was the question
So
again?
hang on, my screen has now hopefully moved. It was about is there is there a reason field to filter what an entry belongs to, such as legal demanding country XYZ, malicious activity, spam, tracker,
Oh,
whatever.
I mean, I only split my list into two, which is the trackers and ad servers. So I can't really refine it more than that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Vittorio is still using PHP 5, so feels your pain. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, here you got a link, Vicky. Link for buying software on the website is a 404, just to make you aware.
Oh, sorry. Where's the 404?
Link for buying software on the website.
So I clicked that.
It's a
Typed in.
small thing. You did say that you're not maintaining the website.
Yeah, I can remove a bad link though. Where was that? Bind. Is that in the top of the page?
Uh, yeah, it's a link to bind to isc.sw. Slash bind, something like that. Hang on a second, I've
Oh
closed
yeah, Unix bind. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I mean,
That
the funny thing is that I've been at IC for 11 years and I know it hasn't worked since then. So
You said it was old.
Oh gosh, I mean, I would say this embarrassing, but I think I've already embarrassed myself enough. So, so
no,
yeah,
it's
that
no big deal.
no. If you've pointed it out, then this is
Especially since it seems like most of your readers are very ungracious and, not thankful. Feel free to send them to the 404.
LLM to analyze domains. That's amazing. That looks really interesting, Josh. Thanks. I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, it's I had trouble with my mouse and I couldn't unmute until now, but I remember this presentation at the last meeting I attended. It's so I thought that might be something you could hit up. Wes Hardiker is the author.
Oh, cool. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And also Kurt for the links you added there. There are a number of, by the way, sorry, I'm moving on from Josh linked with the LLM. I'm definitely going to take a look at that. There are a number of projects out there that combine different lists in different ways. Again, they have their own sort of. There's a guy called Stephen Black who's great, who does a lot of work on host files. There's, I think, filterlists.org as well, which has a bunch of filter lists available. Like I say, I'm on a Slack server, which is for filter list maintainers, and the amount of effort that goes on from different people around the world for different purposes in different ways. Some focused on privacy, some focused on ad blocker, ad serving is remarkable, and the stuff that happens. Nice facts about uBlock Origin, if you didn't know this. The author that I mentioned, the main guy, Raymond Hill, he refuses any donations. I don't refuse donations, by the way, just for the record. He refuses any donations because he does not. He's one of the most principled people I know. He will, he doesn't want the development to be influenced in any way, or be seen to be influenced, or have any possibility of being influenced by money. And he always just says, donate to the filter list authors instead. So yeah, feel free to go ahead and do that if you like. No, I'm sorry. I genuinely don't go out asking for donations much. I have a couple of links, but that's it.
And I think that pretty much brings us up to date then. Apologies if I've skipped over anything. So does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Including anything I may have skipped over by accident in the chat. Well, to be fair, there's quite a lot of ground covered there.
Thanks for all the questions, everyone. Oh, sorry.
I just want to thank you again for doing this, because keeping something like this going for 27 years, I'm sure it takes you by surprise now, you know, what an institution it is. But you think you've seen the hate mail. Just if you try to stop it, it's going to be much worse.
Yeah. I thank you, Vicky. I appreciate that. I do. It's been fun. I am quite lazy. I mean, the whole reason I did a domain list instead of host list was because it's easier. So fortunately, I have a lot less work to do to maintain it. But yeah, it's been really good. I think overall, it's been an interesting. I had no idea, of course, that it would turn into what it is. But yeah, thanks.
Obviously, it'd be remiss of me to say, since Peter is under occupied, if you got lists of potential sites from to block, please send him lots of emails as quickly as possible.
Don't. I know. No. Wait, is that the time? I have to go.
No, okay. Well, let's hurriedly draw a line there before that happens. But Peter, thank you for doing that, and particularly thank you for coming on at such short notice, stepping into the breach. That's very much appreciated and very interesting. And I should say, anyone that's interested in this stuff, I did watch your podcast from a while ago now, Peter, when you talked about the T.co thing, which I thought was quite amusing. That's certainly worth a listen. Just you touched on it briefly here, but I think there's a longer conversation about that you recorded when it was current a while ago. Can't remember when.
There was a lot of angry messages there. uBlock Origin very quickly added an unbreak rule, which basically excludes things from external filters. But there was a period where a lot of people were basically, I'd broken Twitter. So yeah, I did a whole presentation about this, about what price people are willing to pay for privacy. But anyway, yeah, I've spoken enough. Thank you.
Well, maybe you should that as a link with a link to the recording afterwards, just should anyone be interested. Brilliant. Thank you. Right, let me just, conscious of the time, I will very briefly wrap up with a couple of things. So let me go back to my slides for a moment. Okay, I will do this very briefly in the interest of time. So some interesting stuff in the news this week. There's a sort of supposedly a blockchain-based naming system announcement from Packet Networks. In reality, when you look into it, it's not, in my view, really a blockchain-based naming system. It's a sort of regular domain name. It's a sort of third-level domain name naming system which uses blockchain cryptocurrency to actually pay for the reservation, although you rent it and you can get your money back. So I thought it was interesting to read, but it was perhaps really dressing up something to be more exciting than maybe it was, which is the first item on there. Also briefly, PIR, Public Interest Registry, have got 3 open board positions. So anyone interested in that or wants to nominate anyone, you've got till the middle of next month to do so. Oops, sorry, that's a bit too quick. I don't know if there's anything else on that slide. Maybe not. No, I'll skip over those. Really interesting article from Infoblox. They do a lot of useful stuff on sort of DNS abuse, sort of broadly speaking. This one looking at Mouseman conducted by a series of China-related bad actors, building on some work they'd previously done. And in a similar vein, the team at Watchtower have published a piece where they've just exploited backdoors that were developed by hackers but then left in place, and on the back of purchasing some domain names, that they were able to gain access to those and potentially access a number of government, university and enterprise systems for at very little cost. And since Peter's on the call, I shamelessly thought I ought to mention that First.org have published their DNS abuse techniques matrix in HTML, which is now available, and the link is on that slide. Which is good to see. And we talked about that probably a few, or the actual matrix, not the HTML version, a little while ago. That's probably it, I think, on those, just in the interest of time. A whole bunch of other interesting stuff, which we won't have time to talk about, that caught my eye in the week. I just mentioned the first one because I thought it had a really interesting title, if nothing else. Private sector expands its influence on the moon's airwaves as the lunar economy grows, which who knew there was a lunar economy, let alone it was growing. But that was an interesting piece in the Singapore Guardian, I think, or the Sri Lanka Guardian, something like that. A few deadlines coming up. The ones so immediately, the European Commission's got a targeted consultation on internet governance, which closes tomorrow. So those of you with an interest in governance stuff, you've got roughly 24 hours to respond if you haven't done so already. There's a call for abstracts for the IPRI 25 conference, which is around various sort of protection, so sort of CSAM type stuff. Deadline of the 17th, so later on this week. And also there's a call for experts. Again, I think it's the European Commission, which is on the 20th, so next Monday, and then other deadlines after that. So those are the ones over the next week, just in case you were interested. And then also just over a week's time, 10 days time, the next in a series of ICANN training sessions for ISPs on this one on the DNS ecosystem is coming up. About an hour and a half, I think, each of these. They're all online sessions, so if that's of interest, you've got so say that's coming out in 10 days time, and then before we know it, we'll be in February with things like NANOG and OARC, etc. kicking in. So next Monday, then I'll pause here. We've got the DNS hackathon, so the call we were originally going to cover this week. So that's taking place in Stockholm in March. So that's coming up sort of relative. We're talking about that on Monday with I think OARC and NetNod and RIPE will all be on the call to talk about that if that's of interest. Okay, so that was a very rapid run through. Apologies for that. I thought I'd try and make the best use of the time. I'll show the slides as always, plus a summary of the call afterwards. But that does give us a couple of minutes if anyone wants to bring up anything else in the available time. So if you do, by all means, just unmute or pop something in the chat, whichever's easiest for you. I'm seeing some interesting comments in the chat in the meantime. Not everyone can multitask, clearly.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad. I posted 2 links, both of which didn't work. So
yeah, to be fair, Peter. So
yeah.
Right, that's a last chance for anyone else to jump in with anything that you wish to chime in with. Not seeing anyone typing. I can't see any raised hands. So in which case, with sort of 2 minutes to spare, hope that was useful. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you in particular, Peter, for the presentation, which from the chat clearly struck a chord with people. So that's brilliant. Have a great week, everyone, and look forward to catch up at the same time next week to talk about the DNS hackathon. So see you all then. Bye, everyone.